It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, Brian. So now we've gone through the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. Well, now we're in our 50s, and maybe the landing gear isn't quite down just yet, but you're beginning to see the runway. It is now coming into view, and one of the questions you have to start asking yourself is, have I won the game? How do I know if I've won the game? Am I close to the end of the game, or has this thing got to go into way far extra innings before this thing is over?
Well, I mean, we focus on mindset here, and this is one of those things where you've got the homework of, are you a dreamer or are you in the team reality of knowing what actually is going on in your financial life? And one of the easiest ways to do this, go run a stress test. Go work with a financial professional who will take all your assumptions, take into account what you have financially, bring it all together in a plan, and maybe run some Monte Carlo simulations, do all kind of things to really tell you from a stress test or probability of success, are you going to be okay?
And if you are someone who is behind, save like your life depends on it, because your retirement life may very well depend on it. This is where you might have to make some difficult decisions like, I'm sorry, children, we're going to have to go at this college thing together. I can't pay for you to go to college. Maybe you have to take out student loans. Maybe you have to figure something out because I'm not on solid financial footing, because the worst thing you can do for your kids is have to move into their basement once they get out on their own. So at age 50 or in your 50s, you've got to start taking these decisions very, very seriously.
Yeah, and I think it's this whole dilemma of, we're as savers and builders of wealth, we're told to maximize. And I think that this is something that stays with us, but there's one thing to become wealthy. It's a completely different skill set to stay wealthy. So if you have done the risk assessment, you know your probability of success, this might be a good time to figure out, do we dial down the risk so that I actually stay wealthy, not maximize, because there's no reason to run up the score if you've won, because there is nothing worse. And we've had people in our lives, we've seen landlords and others that, have won it all.
Won the game.
Took too many risks through leverage and other things, and then come back to square zero. And you want to talk about what feels horrible? I think a lot of people, they think, I would be sad if I got to be in my 50s and I'm behind. I'll tell you, being poor, not knowing how things are, but imagine if you get wealth, you live the lifestyle of wealth, and then you go back to poor. That is horrible. So work on developing the muscle and the skill set of not only building wealth, but staying wealthy. And I think that you'll be in a good place.
All right, so let's talk about a few ways to get your money right in your 50s. You've gotten your mindset right. Well, one of the ones, and this is just an echo from the Millionaire Next Door over and over again, is if you have adult children, you have to figure out how to get them off of economic outpatient care. In your 50s, your goal should be trying to figure out how you provide for yourself for the rest of your life without having to work with your hands and your back and your feet. Well, if you're doing that and also having to provide for your children, there's a chance you're going to run into a really tough spot, and your army of dollar bills might not be strong enough to shoulder that burden.
I also think at this age, you ought to be debt-free. I mean, that's my take on this, is that you're not truly financially independent if you have encumbrances sitting on your net worth statement. So work really hard that in your 50s to come out of all types of debt. I don't care how low that mortgage interest rate is, you need to have it paid off.
And then in your 50s, you want to make sure you get your diversification, your asset allocation, as well as your asset location right. Again, these decisions become more and more important as you age. You want to make sure you're keeping a healthy bead, not only on your risk tolerance, how much risk am I comfortable with, how much can I handle, but also on your risk capacity. How much risk should I be taking at this stage of the game? Could I handle another dot-com bubble bursting? Could I handle another great recession? Do I have the wherewithal to make it through that if retirement is something that's right on the horizon for me?
Well, if I was talking about minefield or traps to be worried about, I would also kind of bring up, and this is an echo, that fear and greed. The fear is that maximization strategy, or the greed is, I should say, is the maximization. The fear is you're always reacting to what's going on emotionally. I think there's a healthy balance where, as I already talked about, you don't want to run up the score on the scoreboard, but also understand the difference between risk tolerance, which is how much risk you can tolerate, versus risk capacity, which means once you get to a certain age, you might not have the time to recover, so pay attention to those things. They work together.
Another thing you can do in your 50s, it's real great, is start thinking about how you can trim expenses. Some of the expenses that you used to need may not be necessary. We see this all the time where we have folks who have life insurance policies they've paid for the last 10, 15, 20 years, but now they've actually reached that financial independence point. They no longer have an insurable need. Maybe that's a place, maybe that's an area inside of your budget that you can trim the fat, that you can cut out because it's not something necessary to your financial plan any longer.
And then I'll close out this section with the fact that I think a lot of us, especially if you're successful, you don't know your blind spots. You don't know what you don't know because this is your first time, reaching this level or even making these considerations of living off your money instead of working. You probably are at the point that you need advanced planning. So consider taking the relationship to the next level so you can make sure the estate plan, the retirement plan, the asset allocation, Roth conversions before you have to start taking required minimum distributions. And maybe just how are you going to get the money in retirement? So many of us are used to getting monthly direct deposits either every other week or once a month. Wouldn't it be nice if you got that structured into your retirement cash management plan? All that's available if you just consider getting somebody to help you set all this up.
All right, so let's talk about some hard numbers. Now, we're going to assume that right now we're trying to figure out how to hit our number, right? If you're a 50-year-old and you need another $1 million to get to your number, that's going to require about $2,500 a month, $2,480 every month from age 50 to 65. If you wait till 55 and you need that other $1 million to be able to retire by 65, then you're going to have to save about $5,000 a month. That's a hard charge, but it can be done. If you want to check where you are on your accumulation journey, you are on track to be a millionaire at 50 if you've saved at least $351,000. If you saved at least $522,000, almost $523,000 by age 55, you're on track to be a millionaire by the time you get to 65.
Bo, it's pretty powerful if you think about somebody who's only 15 years from reaching 65. A 50-year-old, to have $1 million, you only have to have 35% of the money. Right. The other 65% is going to come from the growth of it. That's super powerful. I can't, you guys, focus on what you can control. The hard numbers, if you're behind and maybe you look at this and you say, man, I'm 50 years old, I have $250,000. It's not an either or. You could actually combine these things.
Yep.
Look, there's nothing wrong if you're at $250,000, you're 50 years old, you want to be a millionaire by the time you retire. Why can't you take that $250,000, but then add into it your monthly behavior of growing, investing? I think you'll be shocked at what you can accomplish in just a short period of time.